Today is the 33rd anniversary of the fulfillment of the prophesied third trumpet, the Chernobyl nuclear accident. Now, some have taught that that is impossible since the seals, trumpets, and vials all have to occur during the final 7 years. Well, we will explain this prophecy along with taking your calls on today's edition of End of the Age. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Dave Robbins with Endtime Ministries. Thank you for joining me on Friday's edition of End of the Age. Now, normally it's open line on Fridays, and I'm going to be taking your calls towards the bottom of the hour. If you'd like to join me on air at around a 3:30 mark, you can call 1-877-363-8463. And I thought, you know what, Friday's open line. I'm going to go on there. I'm going to take calls the whole hour. But there's something today that I cannot skip. And I'm going to be talking about the fulfillment of the third trumpet 33 years ago, which lets you know how far we are into this end time. A lot of people say, well, you guys talk about this all the time, but the end time, the second coming of Jesus Christ, that's light years away. Well, you realize the third trumpet sounded 33 years ago. So I'm going to be talking about the Chernobyl nuclear accident in just a moment. But first, we have to look at a skeletal structure of the book of Revelation. And like I said, towards the bottom of the hour, I'll start taking your calls. So we got to look at the seven trumpets. And, you know, there are three groups of seven found in the book of Revelation. The book of Revelation is not written in chronological order. And once you understand the skeletal structure and how it's segmented out, it's real easy to prove that. But in the book of Revelation, there are the seven seals, the seven trumpets, and the seven vials. That makes up the skeletal structure of the book of Revelation. The seven seals are the long story, the set of events that started way back, and they end at the Battle of Armageddon, the second coming of Jesus Christ, the Battle of Armageddon. The seven trumpets are a shorter story, also ending at the Battle of Armageddon and the second coming. And then the seven vials are a very short period of time, a short story, ending at the same time. Second coming, Battle of Armageddon. So the seven vials, they don't actually take place until after the mark of the beast is administered. And we know that because when the first vial is poured out, the Bible says it will be unleashed upon the people that have taken the mark of the beast during the Great Tribulation. So from that, we know it will all be enacted at the time of the very end. So not only are there a skeletal structure in the book of Revelation, the seven seals, trumpets, and vials, but the book of Revelation also has parenthetical chapters or color commentary, explanatory chapters. And in addition, the main overview of the book of Revelation, sometimes there are additional chapters included. Like the prophetic segment of the book of Revelation doesn't begin until Revelation chapter 4:1. So there are visions that John had seen. One, he wrote letters to the seven churches in Revelation 2 and 3. And then from then on, we have the skeletal structure and then the parenthetical chapters. For example, chapter 12 tells about the war in heaven when Satan is cast down and confined to the earth, I should say, for a final 3.5 year period. And then Revelation chapter 13, so that's a parenthetical chapter. It explains something that's different than the skeletal structure I talked about. Then Revelation chapter 13 gives a view of the Antichrist, Satan's end time plan to rule the world. It gives a view of the one world government and the ruler of that, the Antichrist, the one world religion, and the ruler of that, the false prophet, who's going to be the leader of that one world religion, and also the mark of the beast, the economic system of the end time one world government. So, a clear understanding of the skeletal structure of Revelation, and that the other chapters are included to give a fuller understanding, really helps us with a better understand Revelation as a whole. And I needed to explain all this because when I've got off into some of these lessons before, and me and Irvin have talked about it when he's taught at conferences and different things, that we've had people come up to us and say, hey, whoa, all this stuff's supposed to happen during the final 7 years. Once you understand how it's the skeletal structure of it, and that these things can begin way before the final 7 years begins, then you get a lot better understanding of the book of Revelation. If you try to cram all this into the final 7 years, you're going to be really messed up when you go to explain some of the events. So, since we understand these events that will transpire when the seals are opened, when the trumpets are blown, and when the vials are poured out, then we know the first, well, I'm going to hold right here because I want you to really get this point before I go into what happened 33 years ago. Today's the anniversary of the Chernobyl nuclear accident, and I really want you to get it because if you think all these things are going to be crammed in the final 7 years, it really kind of skews your view on the book of Revelation, which is important to understanding end-time events.
We've seen Bible prophecy fulfilled like never before. From the halls of the United Nations to the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, End Time Ministries continues to reveal the Bible prophecy in the news headlines around the world every day. Whether it's through our broadcast or online at our Jerusalem Prophecy College, your gifts enable us to put vital materials in the hands of those who need it most. Because of you, we continue to replace fear with faith in the hearts of Christians around the world. We will continue to see prophecy come to pass at an even swifter pace. We need your support. Your donation of any amount enables us to continue to broadcast and be a voice in the ever-growing censored media. To become a partner or give a one-time gift, visit endtime.com or call 1-800-END-TIME right now. That's 800-363-8463. Go online now. Visit endtime.com.
Have you had a longing to visit the cities where Jesus healed, ministered, and taught every day? Judy and I would like to invite you to travel to the wonderful land of Israel. Experience the Word of God in vivid color while walking down the roads of the Holy Land with us.
When you are ready to experience Israel, we recommend you travel with End Time Ministries. You will not only experience historical and present-day Israel, you will also learn about the prophesied future to come. It's as if we traveled back in time to visit a different era and discovered ourselves in an ancient time. The tour is very well organized, the accommodations are first class, and the food is delicious. If you have ever had a desire to visit Israel, there is no better time than now. Ann from Colorado.
To sign up to receive your Experience Israel 2019 packet, call Adrian or Jana at 1-800-END-TIME or go to endtime.com. We can't wait to experience Israel with you.
So, since we understand the events that took place, because many of us have lived through this, that will transpire when the seals are open, the trumpets are blown, and the vials are poured out, we know that the first four seals have already been opened. And you understand our teaching on the four horsemen, the white, red, black, and green horses. They're spirits that control the thought processes of men during the end time. That's the Catholicism, communism, capitalism, and Islamism. Those four spirits have been poured out. Those seals were opened years ago. So they don't have to be opened during the final 7 years. And then we know that the first 5 trumpets have already blown, and those events have taken place. The first trumpet, World War I. Second trumpet, World War II. The third trumpet was the Chernobyl nuclear accident. The fourth trumpet was the speeding up of time at the fall of the Berlin Wall, 1989. And the fifth trumpet was the Iraq War with Saddam Hussein, 91. The sixth trumpet's going to be World War III, which is just on the horizon now. And the seventh trumpet is the last trump, which is when the rapture and the second coming occur and the Battle of Armageddon takes place. But today, I want to focus on the third trumpet. Today is the 33rd anniversary of the fulfillment of the prophesied third trumpet, the Chernobyl nuclear accident. It occurred on April 26th, 1986. So 33 years ago now. And a long time ago, it was 1 month before I graduated high school. So it seems like ages ago, even though I'm a young 50 years old. But if you look at it in the timeline of things that are happening, I wrote a huge article on a timeline for Endtime magazine about maybe a year or so ago. And I give from the time of the coming of the Messiah, Jesus Christ, until the rapture, and then from the rapture, the second coming, all the way till we went off into eternity with the Lord. And there are a lot of prophecies that have been fulfilled up before the third trumpet was fulfilled in 86. And so we're way off into the end time now. So the prophecy found, Revelation chapter 8, verses 10 and 11, and it says, "And the third angel sounded, and there fell a great star from heaven, burning as it were a lamp, and it fell upon the third part of the rivers, and upon the fountains of the waters. And the name of the star is called Wormwood. And the third part of the waters became wormwood, and many men died because of the waters." And you say, how did you get Chernobyl from that? Well, it was really given to Irvin Baxter by God, probably, 25 years ago now, maybe? In 1995, Irvin Baxter was led by God to call a librarian. If you've seen if you've been through the Jerusalem Prophecy College, or if you've been through our 1 through 14 DVD series and saw us teach on the 7 trumpets, you will have heard the story. Irvin Baxter was led miraculously by God to have a librarian research. I'm not going to go through the whole story for the sake of time, but God told him, call a librarian and research that rumor that you heard that the Russian word for wormwood was Chernobyl. He had several people tell him that, and he thought, I've got so much coming at me. He was writing a manual on a lot of different things at that time. God urged him this day, call the librarian, she'll do the work for you. Well, when he placed the first call to the librarian and asked her about this topic of Chernobyl and the Russian word wormwood, she immediately said, well, yeah, it is that. And she said, because Russians use wormwood for medicinal purposes, and wormwood turns the tongue black, and the Russian word for black is cherny. She just rattled it off, and he thought, what in the world? Because most people just couldn't rattle Russian terms and definitions and things off the top of their head. So consequently, when they discovered that, they began calling wormwood Chernobyl. So Irvin at that time, he asked her to compile some documentation, because obviously you're going to go on the magazine and the radio and this, that, and the other. We got to document stuff because we get called on stuff all the time. So we document and redocument and then redocument before we come on the air with it. And she called him back a little while later with books and page numbers and information, more than he could read, that backed up what she had said. Well, one reference was the dictionary of the Russian language, and it listed Chernobylnik and defined it as a variety of absinthe, which was in parentheses wormwood with a red, brown, and deep purple stem. So before their conversation ended, at that time Irvin asked her how she knew so much about the information off the top of her head, because she just rattled it off. And she explained that she had been working on her doctorate in Russian, and that she had recently been studying about these terminologies and different things. Now imagine, God prompted him, sitting at his desk one day, said, call a librarian, she'll do the work for you. And he got a hold of this girl who was studying Russian at that point. This was a miraculous experience. I was in Irvin's church at that time. I grew up in his church, and I was in his church, and I remember him talking about these things, but at that time I wasn't interested in prophecy. I was getting ready to graduate high school and start life. But he would come to the pulpit every once in a while and talk about prophecy, this, that, and the other, and he was just going crazy. So Chernobyl, if you remember the accident, it was a nuclear power plant that was located in the Ukraine when the Ukraine was part of the Soviet Union. Most of those who worked at Chernobyl lived in a town called Pripyat, which had a total of about 40,000 people. Most of them worked at the Chernobyl plant. Well, on April 26, 1986, about 1:26 a.m., a Russian scientist who was in charge of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant at that time, he decided to conduct some just basic experiments on things. He was in charge of the plant. You know, he was trying to upgrade things and this, that, and the other. So he thought, I'm going to do these experiments. It's early in the morning, very few people at the plant. I'm going to do these experiments that we've been wanting to do for a while. But in order to do so, now we're talking about a full-on nuclear plant here. In order to do those experiments, he had to disable some of the safety features that kept this big plant in check. Well, he did that and then gave the instructions to raise the rods that allowed the nuclear process to begin. Well, though he was watching his meters and this, that, and the other, he didn't catch the malfunction that happened in time, and within 30 seconds or so, the power plant began to heat up, the reactor began to overheat, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. The result was the place exploded. The first explosion knocked a 2 million pound concrete lid off the power plant. Now, that's unbelievable in itself if you know anything about concrete at all. And it knocked it clear off the lid. It raised it up, blew it up in the air, and it come down cocked sideways. And the second explosion drove a nuclear cloud 1 mile into the air, a full-on nuclear fire. The lid left the atmosphere open to the full nuclear fire. And it was the worst nuclear disaster in the history of the world. Before it was over, the Chernobyl nuclear explosion had released 10 times as much nuclear radiation as had been released with the bombing of Hiroshima in World War II. So while he was writing an article on the topic of Chernobyl, because he was into prophecy at that time, this was before Endtime magazine was ever thought of. This was 86, 87, but he said, I got to write something down on this. And we didn't start publishing the magazine until 91. Irvin came across a video produced by the Humanities that covered this event. And a total secular video. This was not prophecy or this, that, and the other. The Humanities was a secular entity. The title of the video was Chernobyl, the Bitter Taste of Wormwood. Okay, so you remember the prophecy. And Irvin sat there and thought, oh my goodness, all of the scriptural clues for the third trumpet were falling into place. So the prophecy from Revelation 8, verse 10 to 11 said, the star by the name of Wormwood was cast into the earth. Now think about this. John, 2,000 years ago, saw this event happen, and he's describing it as best he could. He'd never heard of anything nuclear 2,000 years ago. And so he's describing it the best he could, and he said, I saw a star by the name of Wormwood was cast into the earth. He saw this huge explosion. But getting back to the video, the main message from the video stated that it was the waters that made the Chernobyl nuclear accident so deadly. When the nuclear cloud was driven 1 mile into the air, this nuclear fire, the winds caught the cloud and the fallout and carried it first to Sweden, then into Italy, and then into Germany, then to Great Britain. And it rained incessantly during that for like several days. It rained continuously, I think for like 4 or 5 days. The rain poured down. Well, this wind was blowing this stuff across these nations, and as a result, all of this nuclear cesium-137 was brought down to the earth. When that's what made it so deadly. Everywhere the rain hit, it created brownouts. Because of that, there are many places throughout Europe where nothing's able to grow for 100 years. And because this got down into the root system, into the dirt, and it won't allow anything to grow there. Forests, nothing. The rivers, this is the big problem. The rivers filled up because people need water to live around there, those waters. They filled up with this nucleide cesium-137, and anyone who drank the water ingested this nuclide. The nuclide is ingested, and it goes into a person's bone marrow. And the rain brought it down into the waters of Europe, and it was radioactive. So everything it touched became radioactive. And about 100,000 reindeer that were being raised for consumption purposes throughout Europe, they had to be killed because they became radioactive. And remember, Revelation 8:11 says, and the name of the star is called wormwood. And the third part of the waters became wormwood, and many men died of the waters because they were made bitter. That's what the prophecy says. Well, nucleide cesium-137 has a half-life of 30 years. Many children were affected due to the ingestion, and nucleide cesium-137 attacks the thyroid gland. That's why when Fukushima, that nuclear accident happened, and the winds started coming across the Pacific, everybody out on the West Coast started buying up those thyroid gland pills, and so that they were selling them like crazy. And so in Europe, the people in those areas around Pripyat and that part of the Ukraine, they developed 248 times the normal rate of thyroid cancer, and many people today continue to suffer as a result of that. It's estimated that well over 100,000 deaths have occurred since that time, and it's estimated that about 2 million people are affected as a result of that, still in their bone marrow. Cesium-137 lays dormant in the bone marrow, but it eventually causes a person to develop cancer. And if you've seen some of the pictures and videos of the effects of that, they are horrific. All of these results have been a direct result of that unprecedented nuclear accident. Now, for some proof of this, in July 26, 1986, about 3 months after the accident, the New York Times ran an article from a guy, and the title was, "The Talk of Moscow, Chernobyl Fallout is an Apocalyptic Tale and Fear." So this was from the New York Times. This is not Endtime magazine or nothing. This is the New York Times. A prominent Russian writer, and I'm quoting, a prominent Russian writer recently produced a tattered old Bible, and now this guy was not a preacher, he was not a prophecy guy, he was actually an atheist. But he produced a tattered old Bible with a practiced hand turned to Revelation, and he said, listen, he said, this is incredible. And the third angel sounded, and there fell a great star from heaven, burning as it were a lamp, and it fell upon the third part of the waters and upon the fountains of the waters, and the name of the star is called Wormwood. And the third part of the waters became wormwood, and many men died of the waters because they were made bitter. This is all part of the New York Times article. It said, in a dictionary, he showed the Ukrainian word for wormwood, a bitter wild herb used as a tonic in the rural Russia. And then it says, Chernobyl. The writer, who was an atheist, was hardly alone in pointing out the apocalyptic reference to the star called Chernobyl. With the uncanny speed common to rumor in the Soviet Union, the discovery had spread across the Soviet land, contributing to the swelling body of lore that has shaped the public consciousness of the disaster of the Chernobyl atomic power plant in the Ukraine. So as a result of that, they built a memorial. And if you understand, remember when 911 happened and there were first responders, the ambulance and workers and the police and the firemen, the first responders that ran right into the building. In the United States, we call them first responders. over in the Ukraine and Russia and that area of the world, they call them liquidators, people to go in and be a wet blanket on a tragedy like this. Well, they built a memorial devoted to those first responders. And at the dedication of this memorial, the presidents of the Ukraine and Russia visited what they called, now this is what they called it. These were not prophecy gurus. This was not preachers of prophecy. This was secular. They called this memorial to the first responders the Star of Wormwood Memorial. So, is that merely a coincidence that the name of the memorial complex, remembering those that died fighting the nuclear fires of Chernobyl, is the exact same name of the fallen star called Wormwood, referred to in the third trumpet? The prophecy of Revelation 8? There was an article that reported that the visit to Chernobyl at this opening of the Star of Wormwood Memorial, the two presidents, I think it was Medvedev at that time in Russia, and I can't remember the name of the Ukrainian president, but they described, they were talking about it, and they described a statue that's now standing on the site. They were standing there talking about it. I've got a picture of it. I've got the original article where it showed these two guys talking about the Star of Wormwood Memorial, and in between the two presidents was an enormous statue of an angel blowing a trumpet, everybody. Now, the Bible says, and why they put that there, I have no idea. Perhaps some of them read their Bible. But these were, the people that built the memorial were not prophecy people. They were not religious individuals. These were people from the Ukrainian governments and the Russian government that built this memorial, the Star of Wormwood Memorial. There you have it, the 33rd anniversary of the Chernobyl nuclear accident, the blowing of the third trumpet in Revelation chapter 8. When we get back from the break, I'll be taking your calls. Give me a call, 1-877-363-8463.
Move Mountains with Irvin Baxter. This book by Irvin's grandson provides 30 days of devotion that will enhance your relationship with God and others. Authentic illustrations from early morning devotions at Endtime will help you find your purpose and eliminate fears. Commit to taking this 30-day journey and experience real life change. Get your book for only $14.99. Call 1-800-363-8463 or go to endtime.com/move.
If ever people needed to hear the unvarnished truth, it is now. There are some subjects that are not politically correct to talk about, but they're urgent. That's why I'm grateful for Endtime magazine. If you're not a subscriber, you're missing information that will impact your life. Endtime has a bi-monthly magazine that explains how current events are fulfilling Bible prophecy. You can get a 2-year subscription for only $29. You can also get a bulk subscription and pass them out to your church. We have gotten reports that Endtime magazine has caused spiritual awakenings in churches when they see the prophecies being fulfilled right now. You can start your own ministry and leave them in doctor's offices, libraries, laundromats. You never know if you might be responsible for saving someone who is searching for the unvarnished truth. That's what the magazine has done in many lives. Call 1-800-ENDTIME. That's 1-800-363-8463 and get your subscription today.
If your station only carries the first 30 minutes of End of the Age, go to endtime.com and click the watch button to continue today's broadcast. You can also finish up later by clicking the archive button.
So, wow, man, is that exciting. The third trumpet of the 7 trumpets in the book of Revelation happened 33 years ago. You see how far we are into this thing? We're not looking for the end time to begin. We're way off into the end time. We're looking at the culmination of this thing. Now, again, I'm going to be taking your calls, 1-877-363-8463. If you'd like to join me on air, I've got a few callers. But before I come to you guys, if you haven't heard the speech that Donald Trump did today at the NRA meeting in Indianapolis, You need to go listen to it. He made an announcement during this NRA speech that the United States would revoke our signature onto the Global Arms Treaty. It's very important, and there's an article. You need to go read the Washington Post article about Donald Trump's announcement concerning the Global Arms Treaty that he announced today. He signed a deal that said we will pull our signature from that. So I got a couple calls. I'll take these 2 calls, and if I get time, I'll go through what happened, because the Washington Post actually made the statement that he was trying to pull us an aversion, Donald Trump's latest aversion to international pacts and world governance. That's the Washington Post. So if I get some time, I'll go through it. Let's take a couple calls. Let's go to Bobby from California. God bless you, Bobby. Welcome to End of the Age.
Yes. Hey, how you doing?
I'm good, man. How are you?
I'm very good. Listen, I don't know your name, Pastor. What's your name again?
Dave Robbins.
Jay Robbins. Hey, okay.
Dave.
My question.
Like David and Goliath. Dave.
Oh, okay. Dave Robbins.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. My bad. Okay. I wanted to ask you this question. Since this is also going on right now,
Yep.
The peace treaty is trying to be worked out between the president of Israel, I think his name is Benjamin Netanyahu,
Yes.
and between his son, Donald Trump's son, son-in-law, Jared Kushner's.
Yes.
So what is the possibility that I believe that Donald Trump is a believer now, okay? But the situation with Jared Kushner is, why could they not think that he might be the Messiah because he's Jewish and he's working out the peace deal?
Right. So I understand your point, because the Jews believe that the Messiah could be just a political figure that comes and brings peace. So I do understand your point. Is it a possibility that they could believe Jared Kushner could be that? I mean, yeah, there is a possibility. At this point, it's speculation. Now, I know that Donald Trump nor Jared Kushner can be the Antichrist. We've had a lot of speculation from that, because the Antichrist is going to come from Europe. Could they consider Jared Kushner as a Messiah, a political figure coming and bringing peace? Sure, they could. At this point, obviously, that would be speculation on my part, but it is possible.
Okay.
Yeah.
So can I ask one more question then?
Fire.
Okay, you was talking about the last generation and everything. Okay, this is also something that I looked up.
Yeah.
And when I learned this, I wanted to learn this about, the end times, like the day and hour that people would talk about.
Uh-huh.
And I had a concordance, and when I read this, I said, Lord, why should I believe in you if you don't know the day and hour, if you don't know what's going on? People would go and say that. They say, the Lord don't know, nobody knows, the angel knows. Well, that's not what it meant.
Right.
When I looked it up, and it's in the book of Leviticus, it's 7 days after the Day of Atonement, I will answer your prayers and forgive your prayers of Moses and the sins of your people. Who knows the day and hour that I will answer your prayer with signs and wonders, lightnings and thunders? And that's in Leviticus chapter 23. And every Jew, every Hebrew person, Jewish person, you know what I mean, already believes that, but other people don't. So I don't understand this. How come so why doesn't people seem to understand and or know that?
Yeah, because Jesus said in Matthew 24, no man knoweth the day or the hour. So when he said the word knoweth, that's Knoweth. Presently, back then, they didn't know. They couldn't know. But that doesn't mean that we can't know now. In other words, the book of Daniel was written, it's mostly prophecy. In Daniel chapter 12, Daniel asked the Lord, what's going to happen? When are all these things going to come to pass? And the Lord said, what do these visions mean you've given me? The Lord said, nope, close up and seal that book, because it's for the people of the time of the end. Well, now that we can marry the book of Daniel with the book of Revelation, we understand that those nations that were going to be on the earth, and all the different prophecies, the prophecies of the Antichrist, the peace agreement that is looking to be doled out in the near future. We understand all of those, so we can understand. Revelation chapter 12, or Daniel chapter 12 actually says, during the time of the end, that the wicked will not understand, but the wise will understand. So 2,000 years ago, none of the apostles understood the book of Daniel. We can understand that now. We understand the prophecies, and we can understand. 1 Thessalonians 5 says, you are not children of the night, but of the day, that day should not take you as a thief. And so we can understand now. They didn't 2,000 years ago, and that's why, we have this ministry, because we're sharing the prophecies of the Bible with everybody.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
All right. God bless you, Bobby.
Bye-bye.
All right. See you later. Okay, so we're going to go to David calling in Virginia. God bless you, David. Welcome to End of the Age.
Thank you, Pastor Robin. It's a pleasure to speak to you, sir.
Sure. You
I
too.
was wondering about the seven spirits in Revelations 4:5, the seven spirits of God. Are they like the Holy Spirit, and what are the seven spirits of God in heaven?
Yeah. Give me just a moment here. I want to look something up for you. So we have an opinion on that, okay? And
Okay.
it's a pretty good opinion, but I'm going to give you just the one that we have, okay? So if you look in Isaiah chapter 11, the Bible says, and there shall come forth a rod out of the stem of Jesse, and a branch shall grow out of his roots. And the Spirit of the Lord shall rest on him, the Spirit of wisdom and understanding, the Spirit of counsel and might, the Spirit of knowledge and fear of the Lord. And so it's our opinion that those would be, now again, I said opinion, that those would be the seven spirits. But do we know conclusively? No, because it talks about other spirits that the Lord has throughout the Bible. This gives a collective seven spirits right there. So it's our opinion that that could be what it's talking about. But again, there's other times when it talks about characteristics of the Lord. So I don't know if we can pinpoint those specific seven spirits in Revelation 4:5 for you, Dave.
Do you think that those seven spirits are like the Holy Spirit? They're like a spirit being?
Yeah, so these basically are characteristics. In other words, there's not, the Bible says God is a singular spirit. He always has been, always will be, from everlasting to everlasting. So he doesn't have several different spirits that reside in him. This just says that the Spirit of the Lord rest upon him, the Spirit of wisdom and understanding. These are characteristics of the Lord. These are not These are not separate spirits like you would think of my spirit and your spirit, separate spirits. These are characteristics of the Lord, and there are others, but Revelation 4:5 talks about a specific seven, but there are others. There are other characteristics of the Lord, but the Bible does specifically say that God is a singular spirit. He's not two or three or even 4 or 100 spirits. He does have many characteristics, but he's only one spirit. He always has been, always will be.
Thank you, sir.
Absolutely. God bless you. Thank you for the call. Okay, so you guys, real quick, because because I kind of messed up, I didn't really mess up, I kind of changed it up on you. I don't have any calls right now. So let me go into what Donald Trump did at the NRA today, because this is awesome. You understand that the Bible prophesies the United States will not be part of the world government in the end time. It's Revelation chapter 13. The eagle's wings are not mentioned there. And you jump back one chapter, Revelation chapter 12, verse 14, and the Bible says that Israel's given the wings of a great eagle, where she is nursed in her place for time, times, and half a time. The United States will not be part of the world government, and we will stand with Israel all the way to the end. So during Donald Trump's presidency, he has been pulling us out in many ways out of the world government, which I am very thankful for. And today, he made one more effort, and this is very important to us as Americans, pulling us out of this world governing army. The world government, I should say. World government, not world governing army. So the Washington Post, and I wanted to read from the Washington Post, liberal, left-leaning. I wanted to read you their account of what Donald Trump said today. This comes from the Washington Post, and it says the title is, during the NRA speech, that Trump revokes another global arms treaty. So listen at this. These are some excerpts from the article. It says, President Trump announced today that he would unsign the global arms pact known as the Arms Trade Treaty in the latest illustration of his aversion. Now, I'm quoting from the Washington Post. In the latest illustration of his aversion to international pacts and world governance. They call it straight out. He's pulling America out of world government. Donald Trump said, I'm officially announcing today that the United States will be revoking the effect of America's signature from this badly misguided treaty. And he said during the NRA speech in Indianapolis, he said, we will never allow foreign bureaucrats to trample on your Second Amendment freedoms. And I know this resonates with everybody around me because I'm sitting here in Texas. If you know anything about Texas, if you're not carrying a gun, you're fixing to someday. The origins of the treaty, now I'm quoting the article, the origins of the treaty, which sets out international rules for sales and transfers of everything from small arms to large planes and ships, date to the George W. Bush administration. It was negotiated under the auspices of the United Nations, and it was signed in 2013 under the President Barack Obama administration, but was never ratified by U.S. lawmakers. The treaty seeks to prevent illicit arms transfers that fuel destructive conflicts, making it harder to conduct weapons sales to violations of arms embargoes. That's what it says on the surface. I'll put it like that. About 100 countries, including the U.S., allies in Europe, have ratified the treaty, while more than 30 others have signed but not ratified. Countries that have shunned the treaty include Russia, North Korea, and Syria for obvious reasons. It goes on to say that NRA and other opponents of the treaty argue that it is ineffective, and more importantly, it poses a threat to Americans' Second Amendment rights by potentially subjecting domestic gun ownership to internationally drafted rules. Global governance, everybody. And it goes on to say the move would add to earlier decisions, underscoring Trump's suspicion of international groupings and agreements that he says could infringe on U.S. sovereignty. Donald Trump is looking at the creation of a world governing body, and he says we cannot, he talked about the process of globalization in his speeches, in his in the debates, a lot of different things, the process of globalization. He's totally against that. So when we're coming into a break, when we come back from the break, I'm going to tell you about our original intent with the Second Amendment here in America, and you'll understand what the gravity of the decision Trump made to pull us out of this arms trade treaty.
Many Christians admit end-time Bible prophecy is very complex and difficult to understand, and for some, a little bit scary. But what if you could understand Bible prophecy? What if you could know what will happen and how the United States will play a key role during end-time events? When you call today and get Understanding the End Time DVD curriculum, you can have peace about what is to come while understanding the prophetic events that appear in our headlines every day. When you call or go online to endtime.com and order, you'll learn the answer to the biggest prophecy question of all. Will the rapture take place, and when will it happen? This 14-part DVD series is the definitive end-time prophecy Bible study available. And for this limited time, you can get it for just $149. Don't miss this special offer. Understanding the End Time. Call now. 1-800-363-8463. That's 1-800-END-TIME. Or go to endtime.com today.
So I'm talking to you about Donald Trump's speech today at the NRA, pulling us out of the small arms, taking our signature, withdrawing our signature from the small arms trade agreement. And I want to talk to you about what really happened years ago. Why do we have a Second Amendment? He's trying to protect our Second Amendment. I mean, he's there at the NRA speaking. And why are they trying to do away with our Second Amendment? The Second Amendment says a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. There are people around the world, people that are trying to create a global governing body that would love to strip you of that right. Why? Absolute control with no means of resistance. That's what they want to do. So, the Second Amendment. Let me get to my point here just a moment. So, the Second Amendment is what they're trying to infringe upon. And so, let's talk about original intent. Why do we even have this? Well, after defecting from England, because of the tyrannical rule of King George, our forefathers sought to build a new country governed by the people. These were educated men, and they knew that over time there would be those that would try to usurp authority over free American citizens in order to declare our freedom from oppression and provide a safeguard against a tyrannical government ever enforcing its will upon free people. The original founders wrote the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of the United States. These documents clearly define the mindset of our forefathers in the late 18th century. The opening statements of the Declaration of Independence provide a distinct remedy for the infectious disease of a tyrannical government, which would seek to deprive free men of their God-given rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The Declaration states, to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive to these ends, it is the right of the people to abolish it or to alter it or to abolish it and to institute new government. And it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. So in an effort to further restrict government encroachment upon the people, the Constitution of the United States was signed into law 1787 and remains the supreme law of the land, or at least it should be. That was the original intent. But in essence, it tells the government what it can and cannot do. And after the Constitution was adopted, several state representatives determined that the wording of the Constitution was vague concerning individual liberties. And really, in forging these documents, history tells us that even though our founding fathers did not always see eye to eye, there were two things that every single one of them agreed on. A central government or dictator should never be allowed to usurp authority over the people, and universal armament is the only check against a tyrannical government. So that's why we have the Second Amendment, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of what? Not a state in bondage, but the security of a free state. The right of a people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So, why would they want to infringe upon that? Why would anybody want more gun control? Think about that in the upcoming election. Absolute control with no means of resistance. Now let's talk about the arms trade treaty that Trump pulled our name out of today. When an international treaty on the sale of small arms was proposed back in 2006, the Bush administration opposed it due to potential loopholes in the treaty, choosing rather to rely on national control. And at the time, the United States was the only nation to stand in opposition. However, President Obama and Secretary of State Hillary Clinton announced in October of 2010 that they would reverse the United States position and support the United Nations sponsored talks on a proposed arms trade treaty. Now, you remember, Joe Biden was the vice president at this point. and with the final negotiations occurring in July of 2012. Although the United Nations would like to pass this off as the Arms Trade Treaty as an international treaty restricting the exporting of importing of illegal firearms, former United Nations John Bolton set the record straight in an interview concerning the UN treaty. He said, and this was the real aim, the hidden agenda, and I'm quoting John Bolton, the hidden agenda of a lot of the people who sought to negotiate a small arms trade treaty really had less to do with the reducing of dangers internationally and a lot more to do with the creating a framework for gun control statutes at the national level. There was very little doubt if you looked at the non-governmental organizations that were surrounding the UN and the negotiations they were pursuing, some of the language they were trying to introduce into the negotiations, that the international aspects of the whole process were much less significant from their point of view than trying to constrain national government. And specifically, and more importantly, constrain the United States. He said, after the treaty is approved and it comes into force, you will find out that it has this implication or that implication, and it requires the Congress to adopt some measure that restricts ownership of firearms. The Obama administration knew it and cannot obtain this kind of legislation purely in a domestic context, and they will use international agreements as an excuse to get domestically what they couldn't otherwise. Now, that's the dynamics of the Arms Trade Treaty. Donald Trump stood in front of the NRA today and said, we are going to withdraw even our signature from that. And so, very, very important what happened today, because when it gets down to it, everybody, they're trying to create a world government. And when everybody is armed, then there's resistance. And if you take away people's ability to resist, then you can just walk in and take over. So what their goal is absolute control with no means of resistance. That's why many times when over the past, thousands of years, when they go in, a government or somebody would go in to take over another country, the first thing they would do would be to take all their guns, take all their swords, take away their ability to resist. Give us all your weapons. Because when people have weapons, they have the ability to resist. And so, that's what the whole Second Amendment was all about, is everybody to have guns to be able to put up a resistance to a tyrannical government, whether it's a national government or a international government in this case. And so Donald Trump standing there, you realize, like I've said, that he's been trying to pull us out of the world government in many ways. The Paris Climate Agreements, UNESCO, which is anti-Israel, many ways, Trade-Pacific Partnership, he just went in and started pulling us out of all of that, and it's very prophetic. And in this decision today to withdraw our name from this arms trade treaty, he actually said that we're not going to let any foreign entity control the United States and our sovereignty. It's not going to happen under the Trump administration. Under many of the previous administrations, it was happening. They were yielding up our sovereignty to this world governing body. But under the Trump administration, he's trying to protect that. Now, like I said yesterday on the program, a lot of people have said, hey, why do you guys support Trump so much? I support what Trump is doing. He's doing many things that are prophetic, that are kind of turning the ship back towards God in many ways. And you say, well, how is he doing that? He's for, realize they're having Bible studies. I've got a friend of mine that for, several months, maybe a year or two, he held Bible studies at the White House. And many of the people, if I called their name, showed up at the Bible studies. And he wants us to all say Christmas again instead of Merry Xmas on the windows or Happy Holidays. I want to say Merry Christmas. Of course, myself, Irvin, Baxter, we all said Merry Christmas all the way through because I understand why we even celebrate a Christmas to begin with. But at the end of the day, it's all about a Christ-centered thing. I want America to be Christ-centered. There are people in America that are pro-abortion. Donald Trump is anti-abortion. I want a leader in the White House that's anti-abortion as well. So you can kind of see what's going on. So if you get a chance, go and listen to the speech that Donald Trump made at the NRA in Indianapolis today. What a great speech it was. So, okay, I got one caller. Sorry about that, Steve. I held you for a little bit. But you got a question about the peace plan. Thank you for calling today.
Nice to be back on the air.
Absolutely.
Mitch, I just got two things. One, last Monday, I was watching Derek Gilbert's 5 and 10 program, and one of the topics, it was about Trump's feelings about Palestine and about Israel.
Yeah.
And one of the things that Derek said was that Trump, his feelings towards it, he was against dividing Israel, and he did not support the two-state solution.
Uh-huh.
And I was wanting to know, how do you think that that's going to affect Trump's deal of the century? And, well, here's the other thing. Let's say that even though he's against the Palestinians having a state and against dividing Israel, let's say Trump gets this peace plan amended and agreed, even though the terms in the biblical peace plan that is prophesied is not on that peace plan.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that even though that's not going to happen, probably not going to happen, do you think if President Trump was to sign this, there would possibly be peace?
Right. So at this point, we don't know what's in the peace agreement because I've heard Donald Trump say it's whatever they want, whatever they can live with. If they could live with a two-state solution, I think he'd be for it. And so I've read articles and I've heard interviews where both things could be possible. So we don't know what's in the peace plan yet, so I can't really speak to that end of it.
Okay.
However, so we know the characteristics of the correct peace agreement. A two-state solution created. It's going to put the Temple Mount under a sharing arrangement, allowing them to build their third temple, all the characteristics. Some people have said, well, what if it doesn't create a two-state solution? Are you familiar with the Palestinian autonomy?
No.
Okay, so Palestinian autonomy basically means self-governed. And they've had a self-governing autonomous situation for years now, where they are self-governed in certain areas, like Area A and different places. And there could be an autonomous situation set up. But really, Steve, until the peace agreement is brought out and we see the terms of it, it's really kind of hard to speak to it. But I know Donald Trump could go both ways. So we'll see what happens in the peace agreement when it's rolled out. Should be in June.
This has been End of the Age, brought to you by the faithful partners of Endtime Ministries. If you're not currently a partner with Endtime Ministries, or if you would like more information, we invite you to call us at 1-800-ENDTIME. That's 1-800-363-8463, or visit us online at endtime.com.
Thank you for watching. If you liked this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel and like our Facebook page.